Hey guys, this is Jo. I'm a brand designer and intuition coach, and today I wanted to take you through the very basics of how to get started using Adobe XD. Now, this is a video if you're looking to use Adobe XD when you're creating files for your Instagram posts, because some people use Illustrator, other people you might like to use Keynote or Canva, but this is another option to consider because Adobe XD is extremely lightweight, it's super fast and smooth, and it's free as well. So that's really, really good. Now, if you're coming over from Illustrator or Photoshop, Keynote, InDesign, Canva, you'll find that there are going to be similarities to how Adobe XD is laid out. So hopefully the learning time that you take to get used to this program is not going to be so long. The other thing that I wanted to talk about is what Adobe XD is really used for. Now, Adobe XD is traditionally used by UI and UX designers when they create something for a web page or a mobile app. So this is really appropriate for Instagram carousels, Instagram posts as well, because it is really in the digital format. So you're going to find this super helpful because it's really an app that is for digital consumption or digital media. So enjoy. The first thing that you guys are going to see is you're going to see this screen with a artboard or a blank space for your artboards to go. So this is your workspace, and you're also going to see a toolbar which is present on the left hand side, and the toolbar basically has the same sort of functions that you would see in Illustrator or Photoshop. So it's got the basic shapes, a line tool, a pen tool, as well as your select tool, and also your type tool, your text tool, and most importantly you've got your artboard tool. When you go down a little bit further, you're going to see that you've got your assets. Now, your assets are things that you will see repeated through your files. So these could be colors, such as the brand colors that you have. These will live in your assets. Now, you actually have to build the assets over time and create your own library for them, but it's just really easy because it's a matter of dragging and dropping. You're also going to find there is a place for character styles that you use a lot. So these are text styles that you might use over and over again in your Instagram posts or Instagram carousels, and they live here too. Now, components, which we'll go into a little bit later on, there's symbols such as an icon or a logo that you will see repeated across your Instagram posts. And then the other thing that I wanted to show you is the layers panel. So the layers panel will give you a rundown on what you see in the workspace. So at this stage, you can see that I've got a lot of artboards because I've got a lot of artboards on this particular Adobe document. So what I wanted to take you guys through today is actually see if we can recreate some of the slides that I've already made. So these are a few that I chose. And the reason why I chose these is because they represent different things that you can do in Adobe XD when you're first starting out. So the first thing that we're going to look at is how to add an image onto an artboard. If you're doing an Instagram carousel, you're going to create more than one artboard because each artboard represents a slide. So for a post, we're just going to do one slide in this particular case. And as you could see, Adobe intuitively knew that I was going to create something that was similar in size to the other elements that are nearby. So it's going to almost guide you along. There's a lot of guidance in Adobe XD for spacing and for centering text and elements, but also for creating the same size. So see how that's sort of lining up so I don't actually manually have to change it. And now we've got our artboard. We're actually going to insert our image. So you might have a photo or an image that you would like to use. So the way that you would do this is just to go to File and Import, and that will open up your folders so you can look for the image that you want to import into Adobe XD. Okay, so this is the imported image, and as you can see, it's a little bit bigger because it actually overflows outside of the artboard. If you wanted to mask this further, say for instance you wanted the image to sit within the artboard itself, but you didn't want it to be rectangular, you could actually mask that by creating a shape above it. In this case, we're using a circle. So using the circle tool, you're just going to create a circle that sits above this image. So you can see that it sits above it because on the left-hand side under the layers panel, you can see that the ellipse is sitting above the image of the bottles. So if we drag that over the top, then your ellipse is now sitting underneath. But for masking, the mask itself or the frame always has to be above. You have to select both things, and you can see that they're both selected because they're both highlighted. And you're going to go to Object and then Mask with Shape. And then there you go. There you have your first masked image. So it means that you can create lots of different frames. You can crop images as you need to. And if you need to edit the image in terms of its size, you can kind of pull this out, change the position as you would like as well. Now, the second thing that we're going to look at is how to actually add in text boxes and create little icons within the post. So say we've got a Instagram post. So again, I'm going to create that. We're going to try and duplicate this particular post here that you see. First of all, it has a rectangle underneath it. So that's the background. So we're going to draw a rectangle using the rectangle tool, and you can either pick up the color that you want it to have by using this eyedropper tool, turning off the border, or you could go into your assets, and if you already have colors that you've saved in your assets, you can actually go and select these, and it's a really easy way to change the colors around so that they're your brand colors. Now, for new colors, what you could do is, say for instance, we have this particular color. And this is a color we've never used on any of the artboards before. Once you've saved or you're happy with your color, you can save it as a color swatch for easy reference. Or if it's really an asset, you can click this plus sign and it adds it to your assets. And you'll always be able to find that in this panel. So we know that this particular fill has this hex code. So I'm going to copy that across and just replicate it to change it. It's also this particular color here. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to add some text. So it's come up in white. So we're going to just change the fill so that we can see it. And as you can see, the text looks nothing like the text that we have on the right-hand side. So you can always pick up the type of property that your text is taking on the right-hand side once you select that element. So this one is currently in Europe of bold, but we want it to be under Kepler standard. We want it to be 80 and 110. We want it to be light display. We also want part of it to be italic. So you actually need to go into the text element, highlight that part that you want to change it. Now that we can see that they're fairly similar, we're going to actually change the color into the blue or the navy that it takes. And to make sure that they're all aligned so that they're in the same position, it's in the middle. So you're going to click this button here. And then you're also going to click on both of them and you're going to align the top. So basically the top of each text box will match each other. So that's how you know it's in alignment. And the other thing that is missing is the fact that this particular text box is quite wide. So you actually want to reduce it so that it forces the your to go into the second line. And again, we're just going to center it to bring it back again. So it's really simple. Now the next thing we're going to do is we're going to do part of this using the line tool, so you can see how that works, and part of it we're going to use the pen tool. So the first thing is to draw a line, and then with the border you're going to choose the border color. You can change the properties of the border on the right hand side, and it is say like 139 in height. and it's got a little circle around it, so we're going to put that there. Now you can see that there's a fill around the circle, so if I zoom in, there's a fill, which we don't want. So we want it clear, so take off the fill. We want the border size to be 2, and we want the color of the border to be this purple. So for these elements that aren't lines, you need to change the border by using the eyedropper tool. The assets panel just changes the fill. If you want to change the border, you actually need to click the eyedropper tool to select it from the assets panel, or you can change it at the hex level. To change the size, I'm just going to highlight it, and you're going to click this lock to lock the aspect ratio. So if I change the width, the height changes as well. And it's moved a little bit, so we're going to center it again. We're going to actually do these bits using the pen tool. So I'm going to select the pen tool, make sure it's selected, and we're going to draw this really simple shape. And the way to get out of this pen tool is either to select the select tool or just to hit escape. Again, you can't change the border using the assets, so you're going to have to use the eyedropper tool to select the color. I'm going to change the size or the border size. And the other thing that we're going to do is add a final line. And then I'm going to line these up so that they're centered. So what I mean by this is this feels like it's a little bit higher, but I want it to sit flush with everything else. So I'm going to line them all up center, horizontally aligned, and then we're going to align to the bottom. So once we're happy with that, that looks okay. But as you can see, it's probably looking a little bit different. So let's just change that and make sure it's the same. So what we can do here is actually line these up, and I can kind of see how it looks. And again, I'm going to line these up from this perspective, and I'm going to pull this up to match. So you can see that horizontally it's not line in line with the rest of the artboard. So you're just going to select everything. So this is how you know it's selected. It's got this little bounding box around it. It's a little bit hard to see, but if you select everything by sort of clicking and dragging and then centering it, you're going to center it to the artboard. And then the last things that we need to do is create 3 of the triangles and then some more text as well. So we're going to create the triangle piece, and we're going to flip it so that it is on its head, so on its apex, and it doesn't have a border, so we're going to take that border piece off, and it's going to have this sort of blue gradient color. So I've already saved this particular color in here, and the next one is going to have an orange gradient, and the third one is going to have almost like a khaki yellow gradient. It's a lot easier to duplicate these simple shapes by holding down Option Shift and then kind of dragging them across, and then holding Option Shift again and dragging it out across. And you can see that it's all lined up fairly automatically for you. So we're going to create a text box, and that particular text is in Europa Bold, and it's in capitals, so you have this option to tweak it so that it's all in caps, and it's in 35. The tracking is 200 and the line height or the leading is 70. So let's replicate that, and it is in this blue color. Great. And we're just going to line these up. So as you move them, you'll notice how they sort of snap into place. If you wanted to resize something, you can resize something just by dragging it and pulling the corners of it, or you could pull the edges. You can also swing it around using the nodes as well. So you'll notice that it converts into a little bit of an angular curve, which allows you to rotate it as you need to. The other thing that you can do to resize something is actually go into the component property panel itself and then just change the width or the height into whatever you need it to be. Now, the other thing that you might notice is responsive resize. So I tend to leave this switched off when you're doing the resizing, just because responsive resize is mainly used if you're working on something like a web page and you want to convert the web page into a mobile app. For the purpose of Instagram posts, just switch this off so that it doesn't sort of stretch it in funny ways. Now, the third part is how to actually create some sort of gradient effect. This is really for people who work on Illustrator a lot. And for me, I create a lot of icons or illustrations or logos, and I created all of this in Illustrator. But I want to bring it into Adobe XD so that I can actually add it as a Instagram post. The way that I did this in Illustrator was actually making sure that this vector art piece was a compound element. You also need to almost flatten it. If you don't create it as a compound shape, it comes in bits and pieces and it becomes very messy to work with. So do the work in Illustrator first before you import it in Adobe XD, and it'll just make your life a lot easier. Once you've got this as a union shape, and you know that it's a union shape because it says this, and it also has this little icon here, you are able to go into your assets or your fill, and then you can change the color around in a really easy way. When you're working with gradient, you might want to change the position of the gradient or where it starts. You can also change the gradient at this level on the right hand side in the properties panel. You can do the same with text as well. So that was gradients. The other thing that I wanted to show you guys was creating these little shapes. If you didn't want to use Illustrator, I wanted to show you how I created these. So let's create a shape that looks the same. And basically with this shape, it is made up of one circle and then a subtraction of a semicircle. So we also need to make a semicircle within here. So let's make the circle first. And let's center it. So to center two pieces together, remember you just highlight both of them, and you can click these centering horizontal center and then vertical center buttons. The next thing we want to do is we want to create the semicircles. What we have to do here is actually like create half the circle, and we do that by using subtraction. So you need the shape that you want to remove or you want to take out on top. So in this case, we don't want this section on the left-hand side. So I'm going to block that out with the rectangle. So we're going to select both the smaller circle and the rectangle, and we're going to select subtract. And that leaves us with this shape. We are going to subtract this shape from the background shape, and that needs to be the thing that's on top. If you're not sure whether it's on top, then you can always see that it's the highest in the layers. So if it's like below that, it's going to be underneath, and that's not going to work. So let's hit subtract again. And now you can see that that is working well, and it's creating that sort of shape that allows you to see it almost as a frame. In addition to this, you can also use the combine tool. So let's have a look. What if we combined both shapes? So say I wanted this to be a really weird shape with a little bit of a bump on it, and I wanted to create one shape that combines both of these. Now you're going to select both these shapes, and you're going to select the icon with add, and this is going to create this little bump here. Now the good thing about Adobe XD is it's going to remember what these shapes are. If you ever needed to undo it, you can right click on this and then click ungroup, so it no longer is a union anymore. Now the other thing that you can do is you can create a intersect shape. So for instance, we've got this particular shape, and I want just this sort of intersect shape. Again, you have to select both for this to work, and you're going to select this intersect icon here. And there you go, you've got this little section. Now, I can make a copy of it and then change the intersect into a slightly different color. It just adds another little element to the shapes. You can actually create a shape that doesn't have the overlap. So say we want to remove this shape from this section here, in which case you would use the last one, which is exclude overlap. Again, it has the little frame. Now, the last thing that I wanted to show you guys is components, which is the replication of an element into your artboard or your file. So say for instance, we wanted to create a shape that was a component that we could always drag and drop into whatever artboard that we were working with. We're going to add this into our assets using the plus. So the same as how you would add anything to the assets. If you ever needed to drop it into anything, you just drop it and it immediately becomes available. This is the master component. This is the very first instant of a component that you created. So any other instances, so say I drop this here, is no longer going to be the master. This is like a child. So anytime we change this, the child will also change as well. You know that this is the master because it has a solid diamond shape in the corner, whereas the child has a hollow diamond. Now the child and the master are different in that you can change the child. You can create a different color and it doesn't actually affect the master. Whereas if you change something within the master, by double clicking it, you need to double click it to get into the master. Say for instance, we wanted to add a certain element into the master. You can see how that element is immediately added to the child shape as well. And you can also see how it's replicating itself in the same way in the components panel in the assets section. If you ever wanted to change things across the board, you can kind of do that really easily without going through every single thing and redoing it manually. So components are a really interesting way of working in Adobe XD in that it supercharges your workflow. Okay, so the last thing that you might need to do when you're working with Adobe XD is actually export your file, right? So the most common way to export your file is to actually select the artboard that you want to export. You can do this as a selection, so you can export more than one artboard at a time. And you go into File and you click Selected. You will be asked the type of format that you want to export it in. And for me, I would choose PNG files and then also web. All right, guys, so that was the end of the video. What did you think? How did you find it? And if you have any questions on how to use it specifically, if you got stuck somewhere, let me know in the comments below and then I will definitely respond back. This is my first video on YouTube. Yay! I'm so excited to be here and it's been so long that I've wanted to create a YouTube video. And if you wanted to get more information about how to use Adobe XD in a more in-depth way, I actually have a course that I'm launching at the moment, which is all about how to create branded Instagram carousels. So this is a really deep dive. After you've gone through this video, you might want to check out that if you were interested in learning more about it as well. Anyway, thank you so much for watching and I'll see you guys next time. Bye.